Thank you for viewing this recorded Reliable Automatic Sprinkler Company webinar. Should you have any questions regarding this presentation, please feel free to contact Reliable Technical Services at 800-557-2726 or email us at techserve@reliablesprinkler.com. For upcoming webcasts and an archive of past webcasts, please visit reliablesprinkler.com/webcasts. Once again, thank you and enjoy the presentation.
All right, thank you for everybody for attending today, and we're going to jump right in and talk about our attic sprinkler lineup. All right, so some of this will be new and some of this will be old. So if you have some experience with our products and our previous webinars, we're going to talk about some things that are existing, but then, add some new stuff. So as always, reliable attic sprinklers are specifically designed and listed for the protection of attics. We have 4 models that are part of this family of sprinklers: our dual direction, our direction single, general purpose, and then our AH for attic hips. As I mentioned before, all of them are listed with UL. FM does not have a listing program for this type of sprinkler. They have pressure ratings of 175, and all of our attic sprinklers, every single model, incorporates the fusible link operating element. That is intermediate temperature, fast response style. Now, we feel this is an important thing to point out. This is a very durable operating element for a sprinkler that's going into a space that you're never going to look at again. It can be installed without the need for a operating element protector. That's how robust it is. It survives all the rough handling tests. And then what that basically means is that if we don't ever put one of those operating element protectors on there, you don't have to worry about not taking them off and going back to the job site. So moving on as to how to properly apply these sprinklers, we first need to identify our roof pitch that we're going to be working with. So it has been since 2016 that we've offered these products, and they had a roof pitch listing range of 4 and 12 to 8 and 12. And what that meant is that basically you look at your roof plan here and you find all these roof slopes and you see a lot of 6 and 12, but then you find this one area with 12 and 12. And that meant that the reliable product wasn't listed for use under that slope, and that could cause some heartburn on applying the products. We'll talk about this in more detail later today, but we actually have some new enhanced listings that are going to allow us to use these products from 4 and 12 up to 12 and 12. So, product is becoming more and more, flexible with use, and then also able to be used on your project throughout the whole entire attic area. So it's all in all, good changes came to the Reliable product line that we'll tell you about more today. Important to note about how to measure using our sprinklers. When we look at coverage area, all of our attic sprinklers that preceded the Reliable attic sprinkler measured their coverage area along a slope. And this is very common with the way we do slope ceilings in NFPA 13. But, we had this thought process of, hey, could we just apply the product coverage area to the floor area of the attic? And that ultimately, not only are these sprinklers offering extended coverage to begin with, but that extends the coverage even further because you're not using the coverage area along the slope. So great benefit right there to understand a big distinction between our product and competitors' products. Now, the one dimension that you don't want to have measured along the floor would be cold solder. So that one we kept intact along the slope. So that makes that distance a little bit shorter when measuring horizontally. All right, diving into the different types of sprinklers and their capabilities and proper applications. We'll start by talking about a single direction product known as our DS56. This product here is installed in an attic that you see like this, basically a right angle triangle where you only need to throw water in one direction. This product has a listing up to 40-foot maximum span. You also have the ability, when separated with a draft curtain, to create 2 separate attic applications and install another one of these and provide 80-foot maximum coverage. Now, this is not really an optimal way of doing an attic. I mean, if you go to 80 foot and you want to do two lines, I get it. But where this type of application makes a lot of sense, though, is when you come across a situation that has a mismatched slope, meaning that one side is sloped more than the other. And what happens here is that you'd love to be able to use a single sprinkler for this, but you just can't because the deflector angles and the roof pitches don't match up within the ranges that they're allowed to. So the only way to really attack this animal is to separate it into two areas with a draft curtain and then use two of our single direction products and then install them. Both sprinklers are still going to be able to maintain a 40-foot maximum coverage on the span. This product is only available as a 5.6 K factor. Have roof pitches for 4 and 12 to 8 and 12, and then up to 12 and 12 under certain applications. I mentioned the 40-foot span before. That 40-foot span comes with a spacing of 6 foot maximum along the peak. A unique part about the Reliable product line is that the installation orientation is meant for the frame arms to be perpendicular to the roof deck, and that can be achieved because we have a single model for this application. We didn't go down the road of developing multiple sprinklers that you need to pair with the roof pitch and then install it vertically as an upright. We just ask our customer to do what they do all the time, which is basically make a deflector parallel to the roof that it's installed under. So very, very easy, very, very smart. Makes it very easy to apply this product, order this product, handle this product, not worry about putting the wrong one in the wrong place. And then should you ever find yourself in a situation where you have some in your shop, you're not waiting for the right roof pitch to come around to use that once again. Another thing that we did was not require installation all the way at the peak up here. What we chose to do was install it basically 32 to 40 inches away from the center of the roof. And then that basically gives you a lot more room to work. You can imagine a whole fitter being able to work, put his head up in this area, and then install that sprinkler, not having to work with his arms over his head trying to get a sprinkler way up here at the peak. So we think it's a little bit better ergonomically for the field personnel as well on the installation aspect. If we take a look at the product, there's two flows and pressures that are available, 6 by 30 and 6 by 40. Now, a 5.6 K factor is very demanding hydraulically when it comes to the amount of pressure needed to output the 35 gallons you need for the 6 by 40. So that's hard to make work all the time. But the 6 by 30 requiring only 16.9 psi, very reasonable number. So on these shorter single direction applications, this is not a very demanding sprinkler. The 6 by 40 is going to really tax your water supply and might always be a situation where you need a pump in areas that don't have strong water supplies coming from the city supply. Moving on to our dual direction applications, the sprinkler you install at the peak that goes in both directions, a very, very popular product because this is the way a lot of attics are actually framed up and look like in the real world. This DD56 caps out at a 40-foot maximum span. So you're able to get 20 foot from each side of this sprinkler. Pretty good coverage area there. Now, there are two models that are part of this product line, the DD56-6 and DD56-27. And the roof pitches for these types of products are 4 and 12 to 8 and 12. Now, the maximum span is 40, and then again, your spacing along the peak is going to be 6 foot maximum. We only have one listing for this product. It's 6 by 40, flow rate of 25, and the pressure requirement's 19.9. So again, not overly demanding to make that system work. If we take a look at roof spans that exceed 40 foot and we want that dual direction product, we're going to settle on one of our DD80 sprinklers. Now, this here is what I feel the most important sprinkler in an attic sprinkler lineup. This is the one that you're basically going to choose based upon your sprinkler system needs. And then the rest of the sprinklers just fall in place because they're listed together as a system. So this product, we really need to focus on understanding what it can do and how it can help us. Well, first and foremost, this gets us past 40 and it goes all the way to 60-foot maximum span. And this 60-foot maximum span is, exactly what was introduced almost 30 years ago with this type of product line. So it's table stakes. You got to have 60. what we did though was we went past that, and we offer a 66-foot span coverage area and basically maintain the 6-foot spacing at the peak. But that wasn't where we wanted to stop. We wanted to go further, and we actually did. We successfully listed this product 10 foot beyond any competitor up to 70 foot. Now, in order to make this work, we had to actually reduce the spacing at the peak by 5 feet, or down to 5 feet. So it becomes a 70 by 5 application as opposed to a 66 by 6 application. Um, that's just where it ended up working out with the laboratory. Now, 8.0 K factor, 4 and 12 to 8 and 12, and then we have those spacings that we talked about. That once you cross 66, you're going to have to look at compressing the spacing at the peak. But I can tell you, to get that extra 4 feet of coverage out of this single sprinkler installation at the peak is going to save you 2 additional branch lines. So buying additional sprinklers and installing them at the peak, while you may not feel like you want to do it, ultimately it is going to be the most economical type of sprinkler system that you can install in this space. Installation of this product is not unlike anything else out there. It's being installed 6-inch maximum off of the peak there. We have the deflector from 17 to 21-inch maximum down. So very, very similar to what you're seeing in the past. Now, you need to understand the listings for the product. So first and foremost, you take a look at the page with the information for this product. You'll find a table that has the flows and pressures that are the minimum required. And the first thing that might jump out to you is a 6 at 40 application. The reason why I say it jumps out is because this hasn't been available with an 8.0 K factor prior to this product. And, what's nice about that is a very low flow rate and then also a low pressure requirement. But let's talk about these other applications because they're greater than 60. This is what the sprinkler really is meant for. And if we take a look at this first one, it's 6 at 63. Now, if I told you that every other sprinkler in this category was basically 60, where's our 60? Well, we didn't feel a need to actually publish a 6 at 60 minimum required flow and pressure because our 6 at 63 minimum pressure being 22.6 and the minimum flow rate being 38 is actually the same as the competitor products that are being used at 6 at 60. So you're getting an apples to apples hydraulic product, but you're getting a oranges to apple in coverage. You're getting 3 additional feet. So looks the same hydraulically, performs differently when you design installation for this product. Now, I mentioned we can go all the way to 6 at 66. That actually brings with it a little bit of a hydraulic penalty because you're going to need to have 2 additional gallons per minute and then an additional 2.4 psi of pressure to make that work. But again, going from 63 to 66, if you can make that work hydraulically, if it means you have to put in a bigger pipe size, that's going to save you 2 additional branch lines. So you're going to want to get to that point. And the last one is really interesting because if you talk to people that have done attic sprinklers, they've said, man, I've struggled to make these things work with a 6 at 60. So I don't feel I'll ever be able to get to the 70-foot number you're talking about. But that's just not true. If you take a look at this hydraulically, because you reduce the spacing at the peak, the flow rate and the pressure are able to come down off of the 6 at 66 number. And they're going to settle basically at what our competitors are using for their 60-foot coverage and our 63-foot coverage. So it is not hydraulically more demanding to go to 70. It's actually harder to go to 66. So very, very interesting thing to understand when you start looking at the DD80 product line, that it has more than one coverage area, and all of them have an interesting story to tell on how to properly apply these types of products. So we've hit our limit with 70 foot. What do we do to go beyond that? Well, we can still use our DD80 at the top, but we'll add in supplemental sprinkler that we call the GP56, our general purpose product. And if you maximize the coverage for all these products, we're able to hit 100-foot maximum span. So this is 3 lines hitting a 100-foot maximum span. You may not have ever seen this, you may never see this, but that one time you do see it, you will be glad that these products exist that get you to that point. Uh, Not totally sure about all the competitors in this space, but I think that, most of them are about 3 lines of sprinklers that are stopping at 80 foot or somewhere a little north of 80 foot. So we're giving you a lot of extra coverage area to make this system work and keep you out of the need of using standard spray sprinklers, which is ultimately not beneficial for the fire protection sprinkler system in an attic. Okay, so you want to build this monstrosity. What does it get you? Well, maximizing everything, you could be looking at a 110-foot maximum span. Again, it's crazy to think about doing, but if you ever come across this for some reason, you'd be glad that you have the opportunity to use this product as opposed to standard spray, no matter what it looks like in the end. So this product is a 5.6 K factor with roof pitch slopes of 4 and 12 to 8 and 12, and then up to 12 and 12 in certain applications. Top of the deflector gets installed parallel to the roof deck. The coverage area for this product is going to be 150 square feet, and that's all, again, measured along the floor. And then you'll notice that by this isometric view here, that's 10 foot, across the slope, and then it's 15 foot down the slope, but it's actually a really uniquely designed sprinkler, more like a single direction type product, where we get you 12 foot of coverage throwing forward out the front of the sprinkler and then 3 feet out the back. So very, very interesting product, unlike really a lot of other products out there for the category. Now, given the way this product is designed with that single direction spray pattern, you got to make sure to install it correctly. So, we need to make sure that the wide open part of the deflector allows that water to project out. The part that's bent down in the back is going to knock that pattern down and keep us, to that 3 foot spacing behind it. So very, very simple. Now, looking at this product in plan view, that 150 square foot of coverage, that's basically looking like this: 12 foot out the front, 3 foot out the back, 5 feet on each side of the sprinkler, total of 150 square feet. If we look at how other attic sprinklers stack up when they extend their sprinklers at the peak, they have a interesting way of making this work. It's 100 square foot of coverage measured along the floor, and it's basically 5 foot in all the directions, and that's it. So basically, you look at the GP56 is 150 square feet, the other sprinkler is 100 square feet, and that's it. But that's not the true whole story with the way this product's applied. If you install it in an attic, we have the ability to install it anywhere you see there in that green stripe. But in order to maximize the 150 square foot of coverage, we have to get this product installed as far away from the eave as possible, far away from our measuring point that you see right there. I mentioned the other guys are a little bit different. Take a look at that comparison here. And basically, if you install the sprinkler anywhere you see in this little red tiny strip, 2 foot, up the slope or down the slope total, you end up being able to get 100 square foot of coverage. So there's a little bit of window to play with there to maintain 100 square foot of coverage. Our coverage changes based upon where the sprinkler's at, 150 maximum being pushed all the way back. But the real telling story about this slide that's up here is you get to see how much extra room you have. So if you're a fitter, you're going to love working in 3.5 foot of space to install a sprinkler versus 1.5 foot way down there. So retrofits could be challenging with other products. This is a nice one to have when you're talking about installing, and room is at a premium. The product is listed with a flow and pressure. It's not an area density sprinkler, so it's going to be 17 gallons a minute at 9.2 psi. The last sprinkler to talk about is our Attic Hip Series sprinkler, the model AH. And this is our sprinkler that looks like an upright and it acts like an upright. We're going to use it everywhere you think you want to use an upright in an attic. We offer it in a 4.2 and a 5.6 K factor roof pitches that go from 4 and 12 to 8 and 12, and then up to 12 and 12 in certain applications. Installation orientation is going to be with the deflector parallel to the roof deck, and then maximum coverage area of 150 square feet. So again, it's another little bit of bump in coverage area. And then the primary use is like in the attic hip areas. So if we use it in attic hip, typically we come across these stepped truss designs. And you just basically place them in there, getting coverage all along the way. And hips are always fun, and they're always a geometric challenge to understand and decipher what's going on. But this product is meant for that. It's meant for all that obstructions, the webs, and placing it in there, and it goes in very easily. There is no restriction to how high your hip can be, whereas other products do have a restriction on the size of the hip, which ultimately results in the amount of coverage area, and then maybe looking at a different strategy on how to protect that. When you look at laying this out, this is just a very generic hip. I get it. Some of them are much more complicated in the real world. But the first thing I like to do is identify where the girder truss is, if one exists, and that usually does with these pre-engineered trusses. And what we do is we install a first line of AH sprinklers on the inside of that girder truss. And that allows the girder truss to really not be considered an obstruction to the spray pattern. It's just behind the sprinkler, so it really gets the opportunity to project its spray pattern out down towards the eave. The next thing I do is I look at these sprinklers along the side here and I space them. So basically I create like a U shape that goes around the attic. And then I focus on filling in like another smaller U shape and then ultimately end up with the top peak there. But as you start to build your second layer, it's important to note that you need to stagger them 2 feet laterally. So basically, they can't be all lined up in the same line going up a slope. And with the way this product works, with its coverage areas being so much greater than regular sprinklers and cold solder distances as well, you could come across a situation where it's very, very difficult to install that last age sprinkler at the peak and make it all work. So there is a special variance to use a single standard spray upright at the very top of your hip. Doing so doesn't impact the hydraulics. You would calculate it just like it was an AH. You also do not impact your ability to use CPVC. So it's a win-win. You get to just pop a little single sprinkler that's quick response, standard spray upright in that location, and basically you're good to go. Now, we're going to talk to you a little bit more about the age and explain how to install it. We do have a unique installation criteria here. You got to make sure that the window, it's basically the window through the frame that you see here. You got to make sure that that's actually pointed down towards the eave. So rotate that 90 degrees, and that's going to let you install the product the way you need to, and then get the coverage area that we're going to describe next. So how does the coverage work for this? Well, it's basically 15-foot maximum measured on the floor and a 12-foot minimum measured on the slope going down. And then we have a 9-foot maximum that gets pushed away from the eave or from the next set of sprinklers. 2-foot offset minimum. And then if you're working with the AH42, we have a 5-foot minimum in between the sprinklers for cold solder distance. And the AH56 has a 6-foot minimum. So the coverage area for this product, when you look at it in plan view, is like this. And you'll notice that it's actually not a symmetrical design where it's 5, 5, and then 7.5, 7.5. We're looking now at 5 and 5, and then 6 behind the sprinkler, and then 9 foot down the slope towards the eave. And that's really why we want the window of the sprinkler to be parallel to the eave so that we can get that frame arm, that piece of brass that will be right here and really impact the ability for the water to project outward out of the way. We want that here. See, 5 foot, that's fine to have the brass sort of knocking your pattern down, but we want ultimate projection 9 foot in that direction. So if we go 9 foot in one direction, how come we don't go 9 foot in the other direction? Well, it's very easy because when you install this product under a slope, the water is easy to project down towards the eave, but you are now projecting behind the sprinkler in an upward manner, and gravity is impacting your ability to flow the sprinkler with a distributed spray pattern. So it's just going to basically pull that pattern in the back down. This is taking the sprinkler, installing it the way it's meant to be installed, listing it at Underwriters Laboratories for the way it performs. This is what we did that was very unique with this product. Compare that to other products that are out there, and it's that symmetrical design that you would expect. The 5 foot on each side, then 6 foot behind it, 6 foot below it. Very, very symmetrical in the way that it is. That also results in basically coverage area of 150 square foot for our product. And if you do the math with what you see on the right, you're going to come up with 120 square feet. But big caveat with this. We install this product in our attic hip. We get 15-foot maximum along the floor. That's again spacing the sprinkler 9 foot maximum away from your measuring point. That's going to maximize your 150 square foot on the floor. And if you look at how other attic sprinklers are listed, their coverage area is along the slope. So that 6 and 6 dimension for 12 foot needs to be used on the slope, and that means it doesn't translate to as much coverage on the floor. So, when you think about the AH compared to other products, you're thinking, oh, it's only 30-foot difference. Well, no, it's actually 35.5 square feet difference in coverage area, and that can accumulate over time in your attic. But here's the thing. That is with the slope being 4 and 12, which is the lowest slopes that we got. So when you increase the slope, it just gets worse. You're looking now at under an 8 and 12 slope, a reduction down to 10 feet by 10 feet, 100 square foot. So now your coverage has been degraded by 50 square foot per sprinkler. So it's not just a 30 square foot difference between these products. The slope plays a big part in how much coverage you're going to get out of this product. So we mentioned before about using this sprinkler under a hip, but now we can use this for installation to extend sprinklers at the peak. So just like our GP56, we have the 150 square foot of coverage. We have the 100 square foot of coverage from the competitors. You guys remember this slide that we showed before with the GP as an alternative to extending those sprinklers at the peak. Well, we have the ability to layer in another sprinkler, and again, it has the same type of thing. Install it anywhere you want in the green zone. Pushing it back as far as possible is going to maximize your coverage area, but now you got two sprinkler options on this. Now that you have two sprinkler options, which one's best? Well, it's definitely personal preference, design preference. If you need more room to work, the GP is going to give you more space because you can set it 12 foot back, and that's just the way it works. The further away from the eave, the more room your guys are going to have to work. The GP also has another thing to talk about, which is the deflector distance. So those green stripes and those red stripes you see on there, they're actually a 2-scale representation of how much room you have to install that deflector. So the GP is giving you 4 inches. That's 4 inches of room to set that deflector. Why that's really important is if you're working on a dry system and you would like to install a branch line and install these sprinklers directly to it, you are going to be able to have an 80-foot long branch line meeting NFPA 13's half-inch per 10-foot pitching and not have to worry. Whereas RAH and the other guy's product, that's a 40-foot maximum branch line that you can get with a pitch without trying to reconfigure the pitching or install sprinklers on sprigs somehow. So yeah, we have more options, and all of them have a little bit of a story to tell on which one's best to use based upon the system that you're installing and what you need out of the system. The AH products are listed with a flow and pressure. They are not area density. So when we look at the 4.2, we have a 15 gallon a minute flow rate with 12.8 psi. And we look at our AH56, we have a 15 gallon per minute flow rate with a 7.2. So this sprinkler is pretty much optimized to try and help you hit that 7 psi minimum that NFPA is going to require. I know we talked a little bit about enhancements to the product line, and that's what we'd like to focus on now. So you're going to get a little bit of some new information here. So the enhanced listings were published approximately late 2023. So if you're looking at the Model DS, the direction single product, you can use it from 4 and 12 up to 12 and 12 to protect hips, mansards, or similar single slope where the protection can be achieved with a single row sprinkler. So no extending of this application once you go from that 8 and 12 to 12 and 12. The model GP56 has this very similar thing where we can achieve that protection with 4 and 12 to 12 and 12. Same thing, hips, mansards, single slopes, and again, a single row of sprinklers. With our model AH42 and AH56, we have worked out a way to install it vertically under a ridgeline, which we'll show you what that gets for you. And then also we have 4 and 12 to 12 and 12 to protect hips and dormers. And that's really just a win right there because the hips and dormers, nothing changes. There's no thing about using a single row or anything like that. This is just hips and dormers. Wherever you're using this product before, now goes 4 and 12 to 12 and 12. So, starting out, I don't know if anybody's ever seen an arrangement sort of like this. Those partitions or draft curtains, shear walls, whatever you want to call it. But sometimes we find some attics that are framed up in this way. Now, those partitions and draft curtains are going to allow us to install that DS56 just like we normally would. We get a 40-foot maximum coverage area out of each one of those. But then we're left with this little tiny slot in the top here, and it's just overkill for a dual direction product. So what we have the ability to offer here is the AH sprinkler installed with a 15-foot maximum coverage area, and that's for 4 and 12 to 8 and 12. So we don't get any kind of extra bump in roof slope, but honestly, this stuff happens on the lower slopes. It doesn't happen on the higher slopes. So not a big deal there. But this just gives you a way to do it. Now, we're using the AH unlike anything that I just told you about and anything that was documented before the bulletin was updated. So how does this work? Well, first thing we do is installation will be within 12 inches of the ridge, and then the window of the sprinkler is still pointed towards the eave. The deflector distance is going to be set 1 inch to 12 inch from the bottom of the top cord. And that's much deeper than what we had before. But this particular application being near the peak, it's okay for the sprinkler to reside further down from the top cord because that heat's going to collect up there and that sprinkler is going to activate. So the spacing on the slope is going to be 7'6" towards the eave measured along the floor. This is a big departure because when we talked about spacing towards the eave, we were doing that 9 foot in this direction, and then we were going 6 foot up the slope. Well, now we're saying this sprinkler is installed vertically. We're expecting to get a symmetrical pattern, 7'6" this way, 7'6" this way. So it makes a lot of sense. And then lastly, spacing on the ridge is 10 foot. Nothing changed there. You don't get any extra coverage out of the product. It's still 150 square feet of coverage. You're good to go. So really exciting stuff just to solve this problem. But getting this all nailed down with the AH allows us to also use it in other ways, such as in dormers. So in a dormer that has a 15-foot maximum span, we can use that 7.5 foot of coverage on each side and get that thing installed with a single AH. And that's for basically 4 and 12 to 12 and 12. So that's the increase in slope there. And we get that single sprinkler located at the peak there. Coverage area is great. And nothing changes. Those requirements for installing it under a ridge, all the same as it was in the previous slide, apply to this one. And then also, if that dormer crosses 15 feet, we have the ability to install that sprinkler still underneath of the ridge line, maintaining those same rules we talked about, the ridge installation rules. And then when we start putting under the slope, we're going to get back to that hip installation spacing rules where they're getting 9 foot of coverage towards the eave, 6 feet of coverage up the slope. So 45 feet, that's a pretty big dormer. Might not ever get that high. What if it ends up being 30 feet? Well, 30 feet opens up an interesting proposition where we can get away with using 2 GP56 sprinklers. And this again will be 4 and 12 up to 12 and 12. And going from you have one sprinkler with a 15-foot floor area inside the dormer. You go past that 15 feet up to 30, you can use these GPs. And then once you cross 30, you could be looking at 3Hs. That's basically the best way to skin the cat with these three types of dormer widths that you see there. When we look at the GP, mentioned before that it looks a lot like a single direction sprinkler, but it really didn't have a standalone single direction application. And that's been all fixed. So now we have clear guidance on how to use this product under what we call a single slope, sometimes referred to as a mansard roof, with slopes that go from 4 and 12 to 12 and 12. And then the calculation guidance on this is going to be adding 7 of these sprinklers all together uh, under that single slope maximum. And that's going to be right in line with NFPA 13. There's a special design area located in the design approaches chapter that talks about using 7 sprinklers in a single line, wet or dry or pre-action, which probably not going to be used in attic, but that is the way NFPA 13 is written. And steel pipe, right? So the nice part about this as well is that you can use CPVC. And CPVC can actually be used with an exposed supply. An exposed supply means that the CPVC doesn't have to be at the bottom of the attic, covered in insulation. You just expose CPVC branch line, install the sprinklers on it, and run it down your attic. So really, really nice benefit here. This particular application that you see here in the past has been used with a single direction sprinkler, one that's meant to throw 30 feet, 40 feet, hydraulically very demanding, spacing very close at 6 feet apart. This product is optimized. This is what it was meant for. It just wasn't initially listed for this. But a space like this, 15-foot max, 4 and 12 to 12 and 12, and then 10-foot spacing in between, this is the best way to do this type of application out there. You're going to save a lot of money on number of sprinklers and labor and everything else. And the design wise, it's going to be very, very easy to calculate. Now, mansards sometimes get framed in a way that they overhang the structure. And in that instance, when that comes up, you're going to need to make sure that there's a greater than 36-inch clearance between the building structure that you see down here and then the underside of the roof deck. And that's going to ensure that that GP56 is going to get enough spray down into that space and not create a problem with a shielded fire. So we mentioned CPVC just a second ago. A very important part of attic sprinkler usage is the ability to use CPVC. That's just not possible with standard spray sprinklers. Like you build an attic system using regular standard spray products from NFPA 13 per their guidelines. CPVC is not listed for that. It needs to be installed and protected with UL listed specific application sprinklers. Now, in order to use CPVC, it has to be a wet pipe system. And that right there could impact the ability to use CPVC because you need to make a dry system. But if you're in that wet area, this is going to be a very helpful way of doing that attic sprinkler system. Very easy, very lightweight, flexible pipe, move around the attic. We can install this, but it has to be installed a minimum of 18 inches away from any kind of source of heat. And then when it comes down to CPVC in the attic space, you really need to think about it two ways. One is, is the sprinkler system piping protecting the space below the attic? And then number two, the attic sprinkler system is being used with CPVC. So two applications. We're going to focus on how to use it with attic sprinklers, but if you're doing a building that has a top floor with CPVC using pendants. Basically, that CPVC has to be run low throughout the attic, covered with insulation, etc. And then the CPVC manufacturers will be much more up to speed on how to properly do that with their products and attic sprinklers. The key to that is that if there's sprinklers in the attic, they have to be attic sprinklers. You can't have CPVC low under the insulation, providing coverage or providing piping to the pendants below that insulation. Above it, if there's sprinklers, it has to be attic sprinklers protecting that whole mess. All right. So Just some terms. This is all detailed in the bulletin, but there's different ways of attaching the sprinklers to CPVC. We have direct mount, we have angled sprigs, we have arm over sprigs, we have vertical sprigs. And you take a look at the DDs and the DSs, they're allowed to have exposed supply, direct mount, angled sprig, arm over sprig, vertical sprig, etc. And the one thing you got to do is make sure that when you rise up with that exposed supply, that a sprinkler of some sort is attached within 1 foot of that riser. When we start taking a look at their other two sprinklers, things get a little bit chopped up here. So our GP sprinkler, we can use that exposed supply pipe elevated up in the attic space for single slope Mansard type applications. And really the best way to do that is to direct mount the GP if possible. And if you can't for some reason, an angled sprig, because the deflector needs to be installed parallel to the roof deck. So an angle is going to have to come into play with that sprig. And then for other things like the dormers and anything else, obstructions, we're going to be using that concealed supply using angled sprigs, arm over sprigs, and vertical sprigs. And then lastly, our AH product, we're using this concealed all the time, dormers, hips, etc. Direct mount is not an option. And if you're direct mounting an AH, it's going to be inside of insulation. That makes no sense. So basically, that's it. Just a breakdown. We get a lot of questions time to time how to properly do this. This is just every model and then every situation of how to use it correctly. So we'll close today by talking about some hydraulic comparisons. And first and foremost, I want to talk about attic sprinklers in an attic space. We got 70-foot span, so it's greater than 60, 70 foot. A situation that has for a long time required 3 branch lines, and you basically come away with needing 36 total sprinklers just in this almost 100-foot long attic. And if you look at the hydraulics, the requirement is going to be 7 of those sprinklers located at the peak, and then adding in 2 of those sprinklers down at the eaves that are, adding on that coverage area. And what happens is, the minimum amount of gallons per minute that are going to be required. I mean, obviously, you run a calc program, you're going to get over discharge, but the bare minimum that you're going to need to get away with is 296 gallons per minute. So it sets a bit of a baseline for this application. Well, we told you a lot about our 70-foot of coverage with a single sprinkler. So that cleans this whole entire attic up to a single line here. We're going to need 24 total sprinklers. There will be additional sprinklers located at the peak because of the reduced spacing that's required. But we went from 36 to 24. So that's a positive. And then especially the fact that it's just one branch line, right? I mean, it's like whether you're adding an additional sprinkler to a length of pipe, that branch line is really the hard part. Transporting it, supporting it, hanging it up there, and then installing sprinklers becomes a little bit easier. And then the big thing is that understanding that when you have a standard spray upright layout in this attic, it's 75 sprinklers. It's going to be 5, potentially 7 branch lines, not quite sure, but it's a lot. And basically, this is a real clean installation. Hydraulically, you're going to actually calculate 7 sprinklers, just like before, and you can't add additional sprinklers at the eave because they just don't exist, which means that you're getting away with, a system demand that is going to be 30 gallons per minute less than what we're comparing it to against the competition. So saving 30 gallons minimum and reducing 2 branch lines, it's just a win all around to try and make this work up to 70 foot. So you want to do 3 lines. Well, we can help you with that. Can't really say why you would want to, but if you wanted to go down this road, we can offer you a little trick here. So you take the DD 80-6, install it at the ridge, just like you see here, and then we add in those AH products. Could also be GPs potentially as well, but we'll call it AHs, and we'll get back to 36 sprinklers and 3 branch lines. So we're now on even footing with what I just showed you from the competition. Hydraulically, 7 sprinklers, add in your 2 hip sprinklers, and you come away with 205 gallons per minute. Now, how does that work? Well, that works because we got a 6 of 40 coverage area, which means that the gallons per minute are less for those 7 sprinklers, and importantly, the pressure drops. So one really good reason to consider this is that you save, in the end, 13 psi starting pressure, and then you're transiting less water, basically 91 gallons less per minute, which means that you might be able to, again, reduce a pipe size. So there are reasons to, say, hey, maybe I don't want to do 70, maybe 3 lines is better, and then I can, select reliable because I can make those parts and pieces match and make a better hydraulic design for the system. And then hips. Hips is what we'll talk about to end this. We have, in this example, a 60-foot attic. So nothing beyond 60, not trying to play any games about 63, 66, 70. This is just, basically an attic that can handle a single line of competitor sprinklers and then use their competitor attic uprights in there. And if you lay all this out exactly the way their guidelines tell you to, you can come away with 20 sprinklers that are used in that attic. Hydraulically, what you need to do is calculate 2 times. First one you do is 7 of those sprinklers at the peak, and then you add in 2 of those sprinklers that are in the hip, and you come up with 296 minimum flow rate for this type of calculation. If you take a look at the second calc, what you need to do is calculate the entire hip area. The benefit to using these products from us, from everybody, is that they have been listed through fire testing under a slope. And what that means is that you do not have to increase your remote area 30% for the slope. You only increase it 30% for the dry system aspect of it. And that would be a 1,950 square foot area. But the way they're also listed is to say that you calculate the largest area of hip sprinklers only. So in this instance, that comes out to about 1836. So using the attic sprinkler saves you the 30%, and then it also saves you by not having to calculate a full 1950 per NFPA 13. But 20 sprinklers at their 14.8 flow rate comes out to 296. So the first calculation is 296, the second calculation is 296 in their raw demand. Obviously, the over discharge is going to, play out probably worse in the hips. This will be more demanding, and that's what, you'll end up submitting to an AHJ. Now, if you relay this out, same attic, nothing changes, 4 and 12 pitch, 60-foot span hip, use our AH products. And we talked a lot about how they have extended coverage and everything else. What you're able to do is reduce the number of sprinklers by 5, right? So we go from 20 down to 15. Also, just 20 to 15. And we talked a little bit about this before. This is the other side of it. Not just is it coverage, but hydraulically, this is to your detriment when you get involved with using those products. So we clearly publish on our technical bulletin a listed flow and pressure, right? It's out there. It's very clear. It's a 7 psi when you select this AH56. The other products are area density. So they don't tell you what it takes to make it work. You have to actually do some math and figure this all out. So your coverage area ends up being on the floor 114 square feet. Just doing a 0.1 density is 11.4 gallons. The 5.6 K factor comes out to be 4.2 psi. And we know that's just not allowed by NFPA. You got to have 7 psi minimum. So in order to make this work, you're going to overdrive that sprinkler to 7 psi, and it's going to be about 30% over discharge just in the gallons per minute that are required. Now, that's a 0.134 density instead of a 0.1 light hazard density. So not really that great. And just like before, I told you the slope didn't help them with the coverage area. The slope only makes things a little bit worse when it comes to hydraulic time. So again, we're optimized, whether it's 4 and 12, 8 and 12 for this 7 psi number, giving you 15 gallons a minute over 150 square feet. These guys get further away from where they need to be by the increased slope. You go down to 100 square foot on the floor. The pressure requirement on 3.2 with a 0.1 density is a 3.2 psi. In actuality, to make this work and comply, you overdrive the sprinkler to 7 psi, and now you're looking at pretty much a 0.15. So ordinary hazard group 1, just by using that attic sprinkler in the hip, is the way that works out. 5.6 K factor, basically your dry system applications. Our hydraulics are no different than what I told you before. 2 calculations, 7 sprinklers at the roof, 2 at the hips, and that's 296 and 296. There's no difference in raw demand there. Calculation 2, again, same exact stuff that we talked about, the entire hip area up to 1950. Here's the thing. When you can eliminate sprinklers, go from 20 to 15, that's less that you're going to flow. So we can actually now show that in raw demand, we're at 225 versus 296. Now, the other thing to understand is that those numbers comparatively, 20 sprinklers of theirs in this hip and ours is 15. Well, the minute that slope increases, that 20 sprinkler number only has the potential to go up. So it's not going to stay the same. But I can tell you, you hit 8 and 12, you hit 12 and 12, that layout you see on screen for us does not change. And that flow rate does not change. So the higher the hip slope, the better it is for our product comparatively to what you see in those attics. I do thank everybody for their time. This is a topic that gets a lot of questions. We answer them all the time on our technical services line. I encourage everybody that has questions that go beyond what we talked about today. And if we run out of time today answering them, reach out. As a matter of fact, I'll be available to talk about it on the tech service line today. So anything you got, no problem. Feel free to reach out.
Thanks, Brandon. Great job as always. When we did these presentations years ago, we used to get a bunch of questions as a new product. But it seems like now, I think people are kind of settling into the different manufacturers and the use of these sprinklers. So we answered a couple questions in the Q&A. I didn't see too many, 1 or 2 technical questions in the chat room, but we actually have nothing outstanding that needs answered at this moment.